So I want to repeat the welcome that both Derek and Dorothy have given you for this afternoon. And I also want you to know that you're here at 4 o'clock in the afternoon because you probably already had a pretty full day. Maybe you're getting learning spaces ready virtually or in classrooms. Maybe you're doing professional development. Maybe you're doing all the above. And maybe you even have started working with students. So what we want to do this afternoon, for the next 15 minutes or so, I would invite you to just come out of your head for a little while, relax, because we're going to just give a little preview of how we're going to work with you through this year. And we're going to do it in a way that we feel can be very relaxed and give you a chance to think about some really important ideas that we're going to use to support you this year, but do it in a non-academic way. We're going to do it in a way that maybe you can be able to connect to your own lives and your own experiences with your school and with the way in which you think about your role in that school and your role in achieving equity for all students, equity of opportunity, and equity for learning outcomes. And what we're going to talk about is the HIL principles. There are only 4 of them. They are deceptively simple, and yet they are enormously powerful. And as your facilitator has already started working with you, whether she or he have lifted them up and named them or not, from the very first time that they were talking with you and getting to know you, they were using the HIL principles, first to build a relationship with you, and then next to figure out what's important for you and how to walk alongside you and be the facilitators you need them to be. And one of the ways we make sure that we can be the people you need us to be in your work is to listen, 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 and then help you find a way to use these 4 really powerful principles to address the things you care about and move forward with positive growth and positive outcomes. So why are we so committed to this work, and why committed to it right now? The HIL leadership principles were designed around research that supports very transformative change in very changing times. They support the work of being adaptive, and they support the work of being innovative and responsive, not only to change, but to how we understand our students and how we understand their needs. They are also a great way to create opportunity out of the current situations that we find ourselves in, and use that opportunity to go into a state of continuous discovery. So there's lots of ways that we can go into this school year, and we're hoping by walking alongside you and helping you take these HIL principles into the way you go into the school year, it will be a school year of opportunity, of discovery, and wonderful outcomes for you and your students. So let's get started down the road and towards that opening of your school year. My keynote is definitely focused on the right work at the right time. And here's what we know. If we can use and recognize the strengths that we have in our schools, and we use them very intentionally, we can deal with almost anything that we have in front of us right now and anything yet to come, because we'll take a mindset that is filled with a focus on strengths and growth, and we'll use that mindset to create the future out of what we're experiencing right now. And how are we going to do that? So I told you I want you to relax, and I want you to kind of just not think too much from the front of your brain. Let's just come to this conversation with sort of our whole brain, not only the way we think about our work and think about our role in the work, but also the way we feel about it and the way we sense it and experience it. And what we do know is when we give ourselves over to the spaces in which we are and the situations in which we are, we understand that a lot of what is going on around us, we don't have control over. It's just like this picture and the saying that's on the screen. You've seen it over and over again. maybe enough that it stopped holding meaning for you. But I'm going to invite you to come back to this picture and back to this saying and find new meaning for this year, because it is absolutely true that we cannot control the wind. The wind is going to go in the direction it wants to go. It's going to be coming at us from the strength that it wants to send towards us. It's going to interact with the wind, the waves, and the currents, and it's going to want to toss our little boat around unless and until we figure out how we're going to adjust our sails to make the wind work with us and for us and help us progress on our journey. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the HIL principles and how they help us adjust our sails. What's at risk here is being buffeted around by the winds and ending up in looking like this picture on the left of the screen, ending up in chaotic confusion because we simply haven't figured out how to work with the wind of change instead of having the winds of change just push us around. And so today we're going to focus on how the HIL principles will help us stay organized and move towards positive progress as we work around and work through all the ways in which the wind is going to blow this year. And of course, the big wind this year is whatever this interesting virus called coronavirus is going to decide to do. So you've seen this picture already. It's a one-page graphic, and we like using it because I don't know about you, but I don't want to try to remember to do things that take 30 pages to remember. I want to try to use things that can be captured in a very simple picture with very simple language. And when I have something like that available, then I can think about how to use it on a day-to-day basis. So we're offering you the opportunity to use this picture to remind you that there are really 4 important conditions we can create in our schools that will make sure that we stay in control of how we adjust our sails and use the wind to move forward. In other words, there's 4 really powerful principles that will help you chart your course as you go into this year and beyond. And we're going to talk about those principles. And as I do, I'm going to relate it to something I know extremely well, which is something I'm passionate about with my time to focus on my own well-being. I love to sail. So I hope you'll bear with me because I'm going to use a lot of images from sailing because they're so appropriate for the way in which I think about how to use the HIL principles. So what's the first one? The first HIL principle is what we call the positive core. Hopefully you've had lots of conversation with your facilitator already about what it takes to build a positive core and why it's so important to do that. The positive core helps us focus on positive possibilities. And then it allows us to work through that lens of positive possibilities and watch ourselves grow and magically transform the environment around us. The little icon on the left is our way of envisioning and picturing in a very simple way what the positive core does for a school. So how do we build the positive core? Well, to use my sailing background and the sailing analogy, one of the things we know is that we don't really want to set out on any journey, any adventure, without a compass. Of course, in the modern world, our compass is called a GPS, and we have it right on our phone. But when I go on my sailboat, I also have one that looks like this. And what I remember is that I have to pay attention to that compass and where I'm pointing it. So we will work with you to make sure that your compass is always pointed towards the mission of your school, that your mission is not just something that is a bunch of words that are on a wall plaque that people see when they walk in the front entrance of your school. But the mission is where you capture the core values that bring you to work every year. Or I'm sorry, not just every year, every day, every hour. The core values that are your reason for being educators, your core values that you poured into articulating your mission, the way you spent hours getting the words just right. That was all about capturing the values that you share And so keeping your compass pointed at that space where you find your values and your why, whether it's your personal why or your collective why, is part of building the positive core of your school. When we lose sight of that mission and the core values that drive our mission, that's when we can start to get lost. We also need to make sure that our compass is focusing on the possible, on the opportunity that is in all the things that are unfolding around us. So when we set our compass to the possible, what we're doing is allowing ourselves to go just beyond what's in front of us today and envision how we can use what's in front of us today to actually realize the way we want our school to be a few months from now, a year from now, a few years from now, how we want our school to serve children, how we want our school to be a place where equity among all children, equity of learning opportunity and outcomes is alive and thriving. So keeping our compass also pointed to the possible is another way we build our positive core. And finally, we have a little saying in the HIL Project, and it goes like this: so we speak, so we act. So we act, so we think. And what that means is this: when your facilitator works with you, you'll notice that they're very intentional about the kind of language they're using, and they're hoping that you will join them in using what we call appreciative language. It's the language of discovery that focuses on the possible. It's the language of discovery that makes sure that we understand and use our current strengths. It's the language of discovery that keeps us focused on the forward motion of growth, not anchored down in and bogged down in what we perceive to be deficits. The language of the HIL approach is always an asset-based language, and we practice that intensely within our coordinating and facilitating teams, so we can practice it with you and help you make that part of the way you talk with each other, act, and think. So that was the positive core. Once we get the positive core really going in our schools, then we can focus on the next HIL principle, which is collective ownership. Collective ownership is a state in which all persons in the school are engaged with, and their strengths and their capacities are utilized for the school's mission and for achieving your vision. The little icon on the left is our way of picturing it. The little figures carrying that key's too big and heavy for any one of those little figures to carry. But when we have collective ownership, it's no longer big and heavy. It's actually very easy to carry. So how do we shape collective ownership? Well, first of all, we stop thinking about leadership as the job of one person. We have wonderful principals in the HIL schools, and they do a great job of leading, but they do a great job of leading, and they're going to continue to do even better and better to the degree that everyone in the school shares the leadership. So we work on shared leadership. We work on making sure that all the leadership in the school is looking forward in the same direction. And we take turns taking the helm. And then when somebody takes the helm, we honor that effort. We honor that stepping up and that courage to be a leader. And we support it and respect it. We also really foster commitment. Commitment is just not a word that you can throw out there and magically it happens. Commitment happens by building a culture of inclusion where every voice is included, every voice is heard, every voice is treated with respect. And through that culture of inclusion and respect and civility, we create mutual trust. We learn to trust each other at higher and higher levels. And because of that trust, we learn to do our work interdependently so that we're not being the lone wolf competing with our neighbor for who gets the better rating on an evaluation, but instead we're letting the outcomes of students be our measure for how good we are individually and how good we are together. And we work interdependently so that we can achieve that capacity. That leads us to being able to create high-performing teams. And as you see in this picture of the sailing team, everybody's busy. They're all working together in harmony. All of the actions that each of them is taking is actually coordinated with the actions of others. This isn't a team with one leader sitting, doing all the work and the others watching. It is a team where every person on the team is doing the work of what they're trying to accomplish. And as you watch the team work, you have a hard time figuring out which one's in the lead. That's a high functioning team. So with collective ownership, then we can really come to the next part of our HIL principles, the third principle, evidence-based decisions. So we've been working with evidence-based decisions for decades now. So what's different about the evidence-based decision-making approach within the HIL principles? The difference is that we really focus on actionable information in real time. And we use that information both to understand exactly where we are at any given point. If you notice this navigation chart, what you see here is a little pointer here that says where we are and a little icon here that says where we want to go. And that's what we do with real-time data. We make sure that we're able to watch ourselves work, watch ourselves grow, and watch the impact of what's happening as we watch ourselves grow as adults to serve children. And all of this starts with the questions we ask. If we can't figure out the right questions to ask, data just becomes white noise. It just becomes something that clutters up the environment. So if we want our data to serve us well, if we want our data to really point the way forward, then we have to start with the questions that matter. And in my experience, I can relate this very well to when I get ready to go out for a cruise on my sailboat. If I know I'm going to be out there for a lot of hours, if I know that I'm going to be going from point A and there's going to be a distance in between, if I know I'm going to leave from Muskegon and go to Milwaukee, I know very soon I'm going to lose sight of the Michigan shoreline, and it's going to be a long time before I actually see the other side of Lake Michigan and the skyline of Milwaukee. And while I can see the shoreline, I might not be worried about charting my course so carefully. But when I lose sight of the shoreline, that's when I want to make sure I'm moving carefully and I'm using all the data around me to guide that movement and that progress. And then the last part of the HIL approach for evidence-based decision-making is to set benchmarks for progress. Again, as you look at this picture, you have a team of sailors and they're looking at the charts. And what they know is that when they lose sight of the land, they have to have waypoints. They have to have achievable waypoints, a point they're going to get to in the next few hours or maybe by the end of the day, so that as the wind changes and as they have to adjust their sails, they always know how to make progress point to point, even if they have to go in a zigzag pattern to get there. So it's using real-time data to understand where we are in the beginning, to chart our course towards where we want to go, and watch ourselves grow and set benchmarks for our progress. With those kinds of evidence-based decision-making strategies well in play, and with a positive core well in play in our school, and with that collective ownership growing and growing and growing, then we can become a school that adheres to the fourth HIL principle. And that's a school in which there's constant state of organizational learning. So in addition to building positive core, collective ownership, and using real-time information for evidence-based decision, there are some additional things that we do in order to make our schools places where adults and children are constantly learning and growing. The little icon on the left shows the people actually feeding the roots of this tree so that it can have great fruit and the flowering fruit and the tree leaves. And that's the picture that we like to keep in our mind. What we're doing with organizational learning is we're tending to the roots. So how do we do that? Well, one of the things we do is we leave our comfort zone and we embrace working in the learning zone. But to do that, we have to create safety. Adults have to feel safe in the learning zone, and so do students. And we have to be safe in order to really unleash our curiosity and use that curiosity for discovery. So creating safe spaces for adults and children to learn is so important. Asking the deeper questions, making sure that we don't make moves based on assumptions that are untested and issues we haven't explored deeply. So in this picture, what you see is an illustration of a 360-degree analysis of a situation that gets our understanding to go deeper and deeper, and therefore better informs our progress forward. Another aspect of organizational learning is understanding how everything that you're doing fits together in one aligned effort. In schools, it is so easy to get burdened down with way too many change initiatives and way too many distractions. A school that is in a state of organizational learning makes certain that all of the change initiatives are well aligned, that we see and deliberately make a connection between the work we're doing on literacy, the work we're doing on student well-being, the work we're doing to address remote learning and make sure remote learning works for all students. All of that work can be very fragmented, and if it's fragmented, you end up having a situation where you crash and burn, where things start competing with each other. But if you can get those connected and make it one united effort and keep all of your efforts moving forward in the same direction, then it's manageable. Also, being ready to break out of the pack. There are times when we watch everybody continuing on the same path around us, but something tells us, what if we just took a 10-degree turn? What if we just altered our course slightly? Do we see some additional wind on the waves ahead? Do we see an opportunity for accelerating our forward motion? Let's break out of the pack and capture that opportunity. Let's use it and see where it takes us. Also, one of the aspects of organizational learning is to understand that our schools, like my sailboat, are built out of systems, and all the systems are in place and like to stay in place whether they're working or not. So when we're in a state of organizational learning, we're constantly assessing our systems. We're updating them, we're changing them, or we're adjusting them so they support the work that we've made high priority. When we don't do that, then the systems start failing us and we end up getting bogged down. The other thing we do is we practice the important routines. That's why we use instructional rounds, or what we call school renewal rounds, because as you try to implement important literacy-based essential routines in your classroom, or you try to implement leadership routines with the HIL principles, those take practice. And as we practice them over and over, we get better and better at them. Our job to walk alongside you is to help you make that practice visible and evident and productive. And to do that, we've created another one-pager, because we love one-pagers. We love things that keep everything organized in a very simple way that we can easily use. And of course, we have lots of resources behind these one-pagers, but if you use these one-page depictions of the work and go back to them over and over again, the work will become very, very firmly anchored in your minds and in your day-to-day behavior. So the HIL process is quite simple. We encounter new challenges, new opportunities by first taking a very good look at our current state. What do we currently look like? And as we do that, we lift up all of our strengths, we consider how well we're using those strengths, and then we start looking at what might be our growth edges. And once we've identified growth edges, we can start saying, well, which ones are the highest priority? And when we identify high priority growth edges, we can make those change targets, learning targets for us as adults and for our children. And then we can focus on gold standard behaviors to implement those targets. And then we can watch ourselves grow with real-time monitoring and make short work of short-term successes so that we can celebrate regularly as we're making progress and accelerate our progress towards our goals. That's the HIL process. Those are the HIL principles. And we hope to be your partners in applying these principles and processes to the things that matter in your school. So if you're going into this year committed to continue to develop literacy and to implement essential literacy practices, if you're going into this year committed to trying out new strategies for remote learning, if you're going into this year concerned about the well-being of your students and wanting to focus on that, we'll help you keep those aligned. We'll help you keep forging ahead with the things that matter to you. And all we ask is that you let us be your partners and walk alongside you as you do this work. So I'm going to turn you over to Derek in a minute, and he's going to give you a chance to go into your breakout groups and think about all this. Think about what's most important for you to focus on right now. And then work with your HIL facilitator to think about how you can use the HIL principles to make sure that the work you're doing on the things that are important to you right now actually gets you the outcomes you're looking for.